Everybody who was alive remembers where they were when news broke that Marvin Gaye Jr. had passed away. That's how big he was. Marvin was more than a musician. He was a cultural icon who redefined soul music in the 1960s with timeless hits like What's Going On, Let's Get It On, and Sexual Healing. His velvety voice and sultry lyrics earned him Grammy Awards and a place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But how he died is still one of his life's most talked about aspects. Behind his monumental success lay personal struggles that culminated in his tragic demise at the young age of 44. What truly happened in those last moments of the soul legend's life? Stay tuned to uncover the untold story of tension and tragedy that ended one of music's greatest voices. Prince of Soul. Marvin Gaye was born on the 2nd of April, 1939. He grew up in one of the oldest neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. His father was a church minister while his mother was a domestic worker. He had a gift that began to show itself at the tender age of 4 when he started singing at church. His battles began at home as he grew up. He was constantly beaten by his father brutally for every mistake and shortcomings. Marvin Sr. took the spare the rod and spoil the child way too far. When he was younger, he described living with his father as living with a king, a peculiar, changeable, cruel, and all-powerful king, expressing his feelings towards his father's rule in the household. At the age of 11, after a musical performance at a school play, Marvin was encouraged to pursue a professional music career as his talent was ever so glaring. He joined various singing groups, and through junior high school and senior high school, it was evident that he would go into music eventually. On the home front, his father had kicked him out numerous times, so at the age of 17, Marvin dropped out of senior high school and enlisted in the United States Air Force as an airman basic. The Air Force was not exactly what he had hoped before joining. He and his peers assumed they would be working on jets, but unfortunately they were made to do menial labor. Marvin had a hard time following orders as well because of his issues with the authoritative nature of his father. He left the Army soon enough under the guise of a mental illness. With everything that Marvin was running away from in his life, it's no surprise that he found solace in music. Unfortunately, he was about to find out that even the world of music had its dangerous twists and turns. The ups and downs of his career. After leaving the Air Force, Marvin decided it was time to go into music. He started a group named the Marquis with his friend Reese Palmer. They began performing in D.C. and caught the eye of Bo Diddley, who tried to get his record label to sign them. This didn't work out, and so Bo tried to get another record label to sign them. OK Records eventually did sign them, and they released their first soul single, co-written by Bo. It didn't chart, and they were subsequently dropped by OK Records. They were hired by Harvey Fuqua as employees for the Moonglows. He worked with them for quite a while before 1960, where he performed at Motown President's House and caught his eye. Berry Gordy signed him to Tamra, a subsidiary of Motown, after some talks with Harvey Fuqua, and Marvin began creating as a solo artist. The Prince of Soul didn't immediately find his niche as he had a couple of unsuccessful projects. Before his first single dropped, he changed his surname from Gaye to Gay as a way to dissociate from his father and also to prove that he was not homosexual or a cross-dresser like his abusive father. His first solo success came in 1962 with his single Stubborn Kind of Fellow, released on the 8th of September and hitting number 8 on the R&B charts and number 46 on the Billboard Top 100. His next two singles, Hitchhike and Pride and Joy, also did very well on the charts, earning him recognition. Between that time and 1967, Marvin had no bad records, and it was only when his friend Tammy Terrell collapsed in his arms while performing live due to her brain tumor that Marvin began to feel different about the music business. He still dropped hits in 1968, like I Heard It Through the Grapevine. His first #1 hit with strong follow-ups from That's the Way Love Is and Too Busy, Thinking About My Baby, and others. Marvin got into a bout of depression after Tammy passed following her struggle with brain cancer. He even left music and wanted to pursue a career in professional football with the Detroit Lions. He was turned down because they didn't want to get him hurt and tamper with his ability to make good music. Marvin expressed his concerns that despite his fame, he felt like a puppet of Berry Gordy and Anna Gordy, his wife at the time. He and his record label had some friction, especially when they wanted to maintain creative control over his releases and his music. It was speculated that despite his love for Anna, he always felt like he was being used by her. He continued to follow his heart and create music, also compromising sometimes with Motown Records on his releases. He was also very good at live shows. He was exceptional even, but in 1978, he and Anna Gordy Gaye had a falling out, and the legal battle that ensued had Marvin in a deeper plunge than he ever expected. With the IRS already on his tail and Anna's alimony payments due, he recorded a song, "Here My Dear," which did poorly on the charts, and he couldn't pay up the alimony with the royalties. His addiction intensified, and he went on tour for the first time in 4 years in Europe as he tried to make more money for the alimony payments and his tax debt. He eventually fled to Europe and remained there in exile for fear of imprisonment. 1981 marked a turnaround when Marvin, still in exile in Belgium, began attending a small church and stopped his illicit substance use while living with his friend Charles Dumoulin. He gained his confidence back and even began exercising. After leaving, he went on to sign to CBS and made wonderful music in a good physical and mental form on 82 and 83. This was when he won his 2 Grammy Awards with Sexual Healing and his album Midnight Love. But despite this famous comeback and strong music, his debt was piling, and the pressure pushed him back down the spiral, with payments for his second divorce also pending. He returned to his addiction. Many remembered his time in Ostend, Belgium, and his reform as the best years of Marvin's life. But unfortunately, he relapsed, and that level of happiness and freedom became a distant memory. Marvin's addiction marked most of his life, but what it did to him in his final year was the saddest part of the whole story. The final year, 1984. In his final year, Marvin suffered a great deal with his second divorce from his second wife, Janice Gaye, and his debt with the Inland Revenue Service. His addiction to marijuana and cocaine wasn't doing him any good either. He had a tumultuous year. Doing illicit substances was an expensive addiction, and with money he didn't quite have anymore. He had already begun using way too much. He even used in front of his mother, who he absolutely adored, and despite her tears, he couldn't stop himself. Despite the success of his last single, he was still in debt before he even reeled in the money. The IRS was on his case about a $2 million debt in back taxes, and he even had to give up his homes as well. He still owed his first ex-wife, Anna Gordy Gaye, alimony, and his second wife as well. He tried to recoup some money by selling his musical rights to his music with Motown Records. Marvin never enjoyed touring, but it was needed to make more money. On one said tour, his use of illicit substances was so much that he had an awful show, forgetting his lines and even his cues and arrangement. An embarrassment to his artistry, and he didn't want to return on tour. He had also become increasingly paranoid, making up stories that people were out to kill him. He requested for stationed guards outside his hotel room, and he bought a bulletproof vest and wore it often. Unfortunately, he was not wearing it on the day of his demise. His final months had him at his parents' house with constant fear for his life. According to one of his sisters, he was obsessed with his own passing, and she believed that his eventual demise was a premeditated self-inflicted exit from this world. How did the celebrated Prince of Motown find himself deceased hours before his 45th birthday? Going home. Marvin was at the house he had acquired for his parents, a place he thought he could find solitude and peace. Although his music career had gotten an awakening with the success of Sexual Healing, Marvin needed a space to also heal himself, still trying to manage his addiction and the struggle that was within him. The man had demons he was dealing with, and he thought getting away from the outside would help. The house on South Gramercy Place in Los Angeles was meant to be his safe space, but there was nothing safe about it. From the morning of the eve of his birthday, tempers had been at an all-time high between his parents. On the 31st of March, 1984, Marvin had retreated to his parents' home for some downtime. Grappling with declining health as a result of his years of substance abuse, and his mental state was no better. In interviews, he had spoken about a possible reconciliation between he and his father, stating that he had just one father and it was his wish for them to reconcile. He had distanced himself from friends and acquaintances as he was still struggling with financial problems thanks to his ongoing issues with the Inland Revenue Service. His strong sense of paranoia that someone was about to get him proved to be true in the end. Marvin's relationship with his father had always been very fragile due to his father's abusive nature. Marvin Jr. and Marvin Sr. never saw eye to eye on matters. His father was religious and strict and didn't like Marvin's lifestyle. Marvin, on the other hand, held in deep dislike for his father's hypocritical behavior. never really letting go of his father's anger disguised as discipline and the neglect he endured as a child. One might wonder why he felt the need to stay at the home of his parents. The 31st of March, 1984. On that tragic day, there was an argument between Alberta Gaye and Marvin Gaye Sr. earlier that morning. The argument was over a misplaced insurance document. The two got into the heated argument that roused the iconic musician from his own solitude. He went on to intervene in the argument, trying to defend his mother. This resulted in a more heated argument between him and his father. A lot of pent-up emotions soared to the top, especially with him now being a man as opposed to a scared young boy who would cower under his father's control. The confrontation escalated but was not physical. Alberta managed to dissuade both men, and they ended the argument. Marvin retreated to his room, as he was known to seek solace in music when he was in situations he couldn't control. Witnesses recounted that there was a lot of shouting going on in the house and it sounded hostile, but both men avoided each other after. The tension from the argument seeped into the next day, which would mark the end of Marvin Gaye's life and career. The morning of the 1st of April, moments before his passing. That morning, there was still a lingering tension from the argument between father and son the day before. Alberta made sure to try to avoid her husband as much as possible in order not to start up another argument. Marvin himself remained in his bedroom upstairs in a maroon robe. His father was downstairs in another part of the house, and his mother was upstairs in a separate part of the house. At what was stated as 12:30 p.m., Marvin Gaye Sr. shouted at his wife from downstairs, rehashing the conversation about the lost insurance document. Marvin, still agitated from the night before, warned his father to figure out the matter on his own and not to involve his mother. His father ignored the warning and continued his barrage of questions towards his wife. Marvin followed up with a warning for his father not to come upstairs. His father ignored the statement and proceeded to come upstairs in search of his wife. This prompted Marvin to once again get in between the argument. Soon enough, the altercation became physical, and Marvin reportedly pushed his father out of the room, and his mother stopped him from further fighting with his father. His mother tried to placate him as they were both in Marvin's room, but in under a few minutes, his father went to his bedroom to get the Smith & Wesson .38 special caliber pistol that Marvin Jr. had gotten him as a gift for protection against intruders a while before. He ran back to his son's room, opened the door, and without a word or warning, shot Marvin Gaye in the chest.
Gaye's mother watched in horror as her husband put 2 bullets into Marvin's chest.
A shot that already ruptured his heart. That single shot alone had already killed Marvin, but as he struggled in his last moments of passing, his father got even closer, while his mother's screams could be heard from the guest house. The father shot his son again at point blank, this time hitting him in the shoulder, and there was allegedly also a third shot. Some of the reports show that there was a shot that perforated the lung and heart, one shot that perforated the liver, and the one he had in his shoulder, a total of 3 shots. Frankie Gaye, Marvin's brother, heard the shots and screams from the guest house on the property where he lived with his wife. He rushed into the house where he found his mother, screaming, "He shot Marvin! He's killed my boy!" before rushing into the room to find Marvin in a pool of blood. He called emergency services, who rushed Marvin to the hospital, while their father was arrested where he was seated on the porch without remorse, the gun still in his hand. At exactly 1 minute after 1 p.m., Marvin was pronounced deceased on arrival at the California Hospital Medical Center. The aftermath of the announcement of his passing shook the music industry. Although there are different interpretations of the events of that day, some recounts stated that after the shooting, Alberta had run out of the room begging her husband not to kill her as well. Others said she stood in the room holding onto Marvin's body. There was also the account of events in Frankie Gaye's memoir, where Frankie mentioned that his brother had said, "I got what I wanted. I couldn't do it myself, so I had him do it," which could be interpreted to mean that Marvin didn't mind dying by his father's hand, and that he was already having thoughts about ending his own life. This is still highly speculative, as Marvin himself had already mentioned years before that his mother's encouragement and his music were the reasons why he hadn't killed himself before becoming successful, and with the hit of sexual healing, it was a wonder why he would want to die at that time. His sister mentioned that his demise had done 3 things that he would have wanted. He ended his life by his father's hands, knowing that this would be payback, making his father miserable for the rest of his life. His passing also helped separate his mother from his father, as he knew she desperately needed, and he was finally gone with no more problems or struggles. She also mentioned that the reason she knew this was because their father had warned them countless times from their childhood that the very day any one of them retaliated against him by putting their hands on him, he would kill them that day. This was pounded into their heads throughout their childhood, and all of them had chosen to ignore and avoid their father than to get into a physical altercation with him. But Marvin had done that afternoon by hitting and kicking his father in a fight. To her, his demise was planned by him in his months of solitude in his room. Fans from all around were particularly concerned about his passing, later finding out that he died at the hands of his father, who had abused him almost all his life. Many still find it ironic that Marvin died by the same hands of his father, who he had publicly spoken about his abuse in a house he had paid for, and by a gun he had gifted him. What happened next? Marvin Gaye was arrested and charged for first-degree murder before he was told that his son had died. When he had initially been arrested, he was asked if he loved his son, and he said he didn't dislike him. This was seen as a statement that held no remorse for his actions, but he was later told by a detective that he had actually killed his son, and only then did he begin to show remorse. Marvin Sr. mentioned that he didn't mean to kill his son, and that he thought the gun was shooting blanks, and that when he shot the first time, he didn't notice that Marvin was injured either. After examination of Marvin Sr. during the trial, it was reported that he had a brain tumor, and given his age, the charge was reduced to voluntary manslaughter, which he pleaded no contest to. He was charged with 6 years imprisonment and 5 years probation, a charge that many felt was overly lenient, but others speculated that it was because of his age and his condition. Marvin's passing came as a shock, and many still didn't believe it, given that the news came on April Fool's Day, thinking it might be a prank, but by the time realization hit that he had truly passed, there was an uproar from friends and acquaintances. Fans felt the brunt of it as they gathered in front of his home, placing memorabilia, flowers, and candles to pay their last respects. According to VHS, Marvin's demise was the 8 most shocking moments in rock and roll. A vigil was held until the next day, his birthday, and he was placed posthumously as the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. There was a funeral for Marvin Gaye, but his body was later cremated and his ashes scattered in the Pacific Ocean as he had requested before. He still is one of the greatest artists that have ever lived, and many wonder what more hits he could have created had he not been killed. Marvin Sr. continued to express his remorse for killing his son, even until his own passing in a nursing home in 1998. But there was no level of remorse that could bring back the Prince of Motown and restore what was broken from his childhood. What do you think about the tragic passing of Marvin Gaye Jr.? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. To enjoy more exciting videos, click play on the video on your screen. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you get notified when a new video drops.